Give me an heir, and you'll never have to worry about money again. Damien Wolf's voice was calm, cold, almost emotionless as he slid the diamond ring across the table. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Manhattan penthouse, rain streaked down the glass like silver threads, the city lights below glowing through the storm. Lena Hart stared at the ring without touching it. Her fingers tightened around the paper cup of untouched tea in front of her. She had imagined many desperate moments in her life, but never this. Never sitting across from one of the most feared billionaires in New York while he offered marriage like a business merger. Damien leaned back slightly in his chair, the black cuff of his tailored suit catching the soft amber light. Everything about him looked controlled, precise, expensive, the kind of man who never raised his voice because he never needed to. One year, he continued. Public appearances, charity events, family dinners. In return, your sister's medical bills disappear, and you walk away with $10 million. Lena swallowed hard. The number barely sounded real. $10 million could save Ava. $10 million could finally move her little sister into the treatment center in Connecticut with the specialists they could never afford. But the way Damien said it made her chest ache. Like none of it meant anything to him at all. And the heir? She asked quietly. For the first time, Damien's jaw tightened. Just slightly. My grandfather's will requires one. The silence that followed felt heavier than the storm outside. Lena looked away toward the rain-covered skyline. Somewhere downtown, inside a tiny apartment barely larger than a storage room, Ava was probably asleep on the couch with the television still on. Lena thought about the overdue notices stuffed inside her purse. The piano lessons she taught 7 days a week. The nights she skipped dinner so Ava could eat better meals. She had spent years surviving one paycheck at a time. Damien Wolf represented a world she hated. A world where people solved problems with contracts instead of feelings. Yet somehow, he was the only person offering help. Damien opened a black folder and slid it toward her. The contract waited inside, crisp white paper against dark leather. You don't have to love me, he said. In fact, I'd prefer if you didn't. Lena gave a soft, almost broken laugh at that. You really know how to make a girl feel special. His expression didn't change. Love complicates things. She should have stood up. She should have walked out of the penthouse and never looked back. But then her phone buzzed against the table. One message. The treatment center had increased Ava's deposit deadline again. Lena closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, Damien was still watching her with that unreadable stare. Not impatient, not cruel, just distant. Like a man who stopped expecting warmth from the world a very long time ago. Slowly, Lena reached for the pen beside the contract. But as her fingers brushed the paper, her eyes landed on something near the bookshelf across the room. A tiny silver music box shaped like a moon. Old, dust-covered, forgotten. And for the first time that night, Damien Wolf looked afraid. Lena signed the contract 3 nights later while snow drifted quietly outside the Wolf estate. The massive iron gates closed behind her black town car with a heavy sound that made her stomach tighten. Everything about the property felt unreal. The mansion stretched across nearly 4 acres overlooking the Hudson River, glowing softly beneath rows of golden exterior lights. Marble steps, tall windows, perfect hedges trimmed so precisely they looked painted into place. It did not feel like a home. It felt like a museum built for someone who never smiled. A housekeeper in a navy uniform greeted her at the entrance. Welcome, Mrs. Wolf. The words almost made Lena stop walking. Mrs. Wolf. She still could not connect that name to herself. Inside, the foyer smelled faintly of cedarwood and expensive candles. Crystal chandeliers reflected against polished black marble floors, while quiet piano music drifted from hidden speakers somewhere overhead. Lena adjusted the sleeve of her old wool coat, suddenly aware of how small she looked standing inside Damien's world. The housekeeper offered to carry her suitcase, but Lena refused softly. It was the same faded suitcase she had owned since college, one wheel slightly crooked from years of dragging it through subway stations. Somehow it felt like the only piece of her old life she had left. Mr. Wolf is waiting in the west dining room, the woman explained. Lena followed her through endless hallways lined with oil paintings and tall glass displays filled with antique watches and awards. Every room looked untouched. Perfect. Empty. When she finally stepped into the dining room, Damien was standing near the fireplace reading something on his tablet. He looked exactly the same as the night she met him. Dark tailored suit, calm posture, controlled expression. The firelight flickered against the sharp angles of his face, but somehow even warmth itself seemed unable to reach him. "You are late," he said without looking up. Lena glanced at the grandfather clock near the wall. "It is 7:03. Dinner starts at 7. She almost laughed at that. Almost. Instead, she placed her suitcase beside the chair and sat carefully at the end of the long table. The distance between them felt ridiculous, like they were strangers trapped inside some royal ceremony instead of newly married people. A waiter silently poured water into crystal glasses before disappearing again. Damien finally lowered the tablet. "Tomorrow morning, there will be interviews with the press. You will receive wardrobe selections tonight. My assistant will explain the charity calendar and social schedule." Lena blinked. Social schedule? Appearances, fundraisers, corporate dinners. "You are now the face of Wolf Foundation beside me." The way he said it made her feel less like a wife and more like another asset his company had acquired. Damien slid a small velvet box across the table toward her. Lena hesitated before opening it. Inside rested a stunning diamond ring surrounded by tiny emerald stones. "Elegant, cold, heavy. You are expected to wear it publicly," he said. Lena stared at the ring for a moment too long. Suddenly, another image flashed through her mind. A tiny hospital bracelet. Pale fingers. Silence. Her chest tightened instantly. She shut the box. Too quickly. Damien noticed. Of course he noticed. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Is there a problem?" Lena forced herself to breathe normally. "No," but Damien kept watching her carefully now, like he had caught a crack in something she was trying desperately to hide. Then, somewhere upstairs, faint piano notes drifted through the mansion. Soft, fragile, almost ghost-like. Lena looked up instinctively. Damien's expression changed immediately. The warmth vanished from his eyes so fast it was unsettling. "Do not go to the third floor," he said quietly. "Especially the last room at the end of the hallway." Lena barely slept that night. The bedroom Damien had assigned to her was larger than her entire apartment downtown, yet somehow it felt colder. Moonlight spilled through the enormous windows overlooking the Hudson River, painting silver shadows across the walls while the quiet hum of the mansion echoed around her. She sat near the edge of the bed in an oversized sweater, staring at the untouched wardrobe boxes stacked beside the fireplace. Designer gowns. Shoes that probably cost more than a month of rent. Jewelry locked inside velvet cases. It all felt absurd, like she had stepped into someone else's life by mistake. Around 2 in the morning, she heard it again. Piano music. Soft and distant. The melody floated down from the third floor like a memory, trying not to be forgotten. Lena froze. It was not polished or perfect. The notes sounded hesitant. Lonely. Almost broken. She slipped out of bed quietly and opened her bedroom door. The hallway outside was dim except for small wall sconces casting warm pools of light across the dark wood floors. For a moment, she remembered Damien's warning. Do not go to the third floor, especially the last room at the end of the hallway. But something about the music pulled at her chest. Slowly, Lena climbed the staircase barefoot, one hand resting lightly against the polished railing. The mansion became quieter with every step until all she could hear was the piano. The third floor looked different from the rest of the house. Less polished, less staged. Family photographs lined the walls here instead of business awards. Old, black and white pictures. Summer vacations. Smiles that no longer existed downstairs. Then the music stopped. Silence flooded the hallway instantly. Lena's eyes drifted toward the final door at the end. Slightly open, a thin ribbon of warm light spilled across the floor beneath it. Her heartbeat quickened. She should leave. Instead, she stepped closer. The room inside was softly lit by a single lamp beside the window. At first glance, it looked untouched for years. Pale blue walls. A white rocking chair. Shelves lined with children's books and stuffed animals covered in a thin layer of dust. And in the center of the room sat a polished grand piano. Damien stood beside it with one hand resting against the edge, his back turned toward her. He still wore the same dark dress shirt from dinner, sleeves rolled slightly at the wrists now, his posture tense like he had been caught doing something forbidden. Lena's breath caught softly when she noticed the tiny baby crib near the far wall. Empty, perfectly made. Frozen in time. Damien slowly looked over his shoulder. The coldness in his expression returned instantly the second he saw her standing there. "I told you not to come up here." His voice was low and controlled, but underneath it she heard something else. Pain. Real pain. Lena glanced toward the piano. "I heard music. You should have ignored it." She looked back at him carefully. "Who used this room?" For several long seconds Damien said nothing at all. Then his eyes shifted toward the crib for only a moment before hardening again. No one anymore. He walked past her toward the hallway, but Lena noticed something small resting on top of the piano bench. A framed ultrasound photo, cracked slightly across the glass. Damien followed her gaze immediately. His entire body stiffened. "Do not touch that." The sharpness in his voice startled her. Lena stepped back instinctively. Damien closed the nursery door behind them with quiet force before turning away without another word. But just before he disappeared down the staircase, Lena noticed him loosen his tie with trembling fingers, like holding himself together suddenly took effort. The next morning the Wolf Mansion transformed into something unrecognizable. Stylists arrived before sunrise carrying garment bags and makeup cases while assistants rushed through hallways with schedules clipped to tablets. By 8 o'clock, Lena was seated in front of a massive vanity mirror while two women pinned her hair into soft waves and adjusted the silk cream-colored dress chosen for her first public appearance as Mrs. Wolf. The fabric felt delicate against her skin, but the diamond ring on her finger still felt heavy. Too heavy. "Smile naturally when photographers ask about the marriage," one assistant explained while fastening a bracelet around Lena's wrist. "And avoid questions about children unless Mr. Wolf answers first." Lena looked up slightly at that. "Why?" The assistant hesitated only half a second. "Because the media enjoys rumors." 30 minutes later, Lena stepped into the main foyer and nearly stopped breathing. Damien stood near the entrance waiting for her in a charcoal suit with a black overcoat draped over one arm. The morning light pouring through the tall windows caught the silver in his watch and the sharp line of his jaw. He looked calm as always, but his eyes flickered briefly when he saw her descending the staircase. Not warmth exactly. More like surprise he did not want anyone else to notice. "You are late again," he said quietly. Lena glanced toward the giant clock above the doorway. "It is 8:01. Which means you are 1 minute late." She rolled her eyes softly before she could stop herself. For the first time, something dangerously close to amusement touched Damien's expression. Tiny. Gone almost instantly. Outside, camera flashes exploded the second they arrived at the charity gala downtown. Reporters crowded behind velvet barriers, while luxury cars lined the curb beneath rows of glowing white lights. Lena froze for half a second when photographers began shouting her name. Damien noticed immediately. Without saying anything, he placed one hand gently against the small of her back and guided her forward through the chaos. The touch surprised her more than it should have. Warm, steady, protective. Inside the ballroom, crystal chandeliers shimmered. Above, hundreds of guests dressed in black tie elegance. Conversations blended with soft violin music while waiters carried trays of champagne through the crowd. Everything looked polished and beautiful, but Lena could already feel the invisible judgment in the room. Women in couture gowns glanced at her ring before whispering behind polite smiles. Men studied her like they were trying to understand how a piano teacher from Brooklyn ended up beside Damien Wolf. Then came the voice. "So this is the mystery bride." Lena turned to see a tall blonde woman approaching in a silver gown that probably cost more than a new car. Her smile looked flawless. Her eyes did not. "Vanessa Laurent." She introduced herself smoothly. "Damien and I have known each other for years." Lena noticed the way Vanessa emphasized years. Damien's posture stiffened slightly beside her. "Congratulations on the marriage," Vanessa continued, her gaze drifting deliberately over Lena's dress. "Although I must admit, I expected someone a little more refined." The insult landed softly enough that nearby guests pretended not to hear it. Lena felt heat rise in her cheeks, but before she could respond, Damien's voice cut through the tension like glass. "Then your expectations continue to disappoint you." Silence spread instantly around them. Vanessa blinked in shock. Damien rarely defended anyone publicly, especially not like this. He stepped closer to Lena without taking his eyes off Vanessa. "My wife does not need your approval." Wife. The word sounded strangely real coming from him. Vanessa forced a smile, but the damage was done. She walked away moments later under the curious stares of half the ballroom. Lena slowly looked toward Damien. You did not have to do that. Yes, he said calmly, taking a glass of champagne from a passing tray. I did. But as the orchestra music swelled around them, Lena noticed something unsettling. Across the ballroom, an older man stood watching Damien with cold interest while holding a leather folder marked Wolf Family Trust. The rest of the gala passed beneath layers of music, champagne glasses, and forced smiles, but Lena could still feel the older man watching. Damien from across the ballroom. Every time she glanced in that direction, the leather folder remained tucked beneath his arm, like something important enough to ruin lives. Damien noticed her distraction almost immediately. Do not look at him again, he murmured quietly while greeting another investor. Who is he? Arthur Whitmore. My grandfather's attorney. Lena frowned slightly. The trust. Damien took a slow sip of champagne before answering. The reason this marriage exists. His tone turned colder after that, shutting the conversation down completely. Yet as the evening continued, Lena began noticing something strange. Damien never once left her standing alone. When reporters approached too aggressively, he redirected them. When investors asked invasive questions about children or heirs, his jaw tightened before changing the subject. At one point, a photographer asked them to stand closer together near the ballroom staircase. Lena instinctively stiffened under the flashing cameras, but Damien quietly leaned down near her ear. Relax your shoulders. Easy for you to say. Pretend they do not exist. There are at least 50 of them. A faint breath of amusement escaped him. 73. Lena looked up at him in surprise. For a second, the ruthless billionaire everyone feared almost seemed human. Then Arthur Whitmore approached them directly. The older man carried himself with the calm confidence of someone who knew secrets nobody else wanted exposed. Mr. Wolf, he greeted politely. Mrs. Wolf. Lena noticed the subtle pause before her new name. Arthur's eyes studied her carefully, not cruelly but analytically, like he was trying to determine whether she belonged here. Your grandfather requested another meeting next week, Arthur continued. The board is becoming impatient. Damien's entire posture hardened again. They will get their heir. Lena felt the words land heavily between them. Arthur gave a slow nod before glancing briefly at her left hand, where the emerald ring shimmered beneath the ballroom lights. I certainly hope so. Then he walked away. The silence afterward felt uncomfortable. Lena looked toward Damien. You really talk about children like business contracts. Because for my family, they are. His answer came too quickly, too rehearsed. Before Lena could respond, applause suddenly echoed through the ballroom as the charity auction began near the stage. Damien offered her his arm automatically. Stay beside me. The auction moved quickly through paintings, jewelry, and vacation estates donated by wealthy guests. Lena barely paid attention until the host rolled out one final item beneath a velvet cloth. And our final piece tonight, the announcer said brightly. A restored antique moon-shaped music box from the private Wolf family collection. Lena's breath caught instantly. The tiny silver moon music box from Damien's penthouse. The same one she had seen beside the bookshelf the night she signed the contract. Damien went completely still beside her. Why is that here? Lena whispered. Damien's face drained of color so subtly most people would not notice. But she did. Across the ballroom, Arthur Whitmore was already watching him carefully. It was not supposed to be included, Damien said quietly. The auctioneer opened the delicate music box, and a soft lullaby drifted through the ballroom speakers. Beautiful, fragile, haunting. Then Lena noticed it. Damien's hands were shaking. Not visibly to anyone else perhaps, but enough for her to see. And for the first time since meeting him, she realized the cold billionaire standing beside her was not heartless at all. He was terrified. The ballroom applause faded into nervous murmurs as the delicate lullaby continued drifting from the silver moon music box. Damien's eyes never left it. Lena could almost feel the memories pulling him somewhere far away from the glittering gala and flashing cameras surrounding them. Then suddenly, Damien stepped forward. The bidding is canceled, he announced calmly. The room fell silent. The auctioneer blinked in confusion. Mr. Wolf, this item was already approved by the board for, I said it is canceled. His voice remained controlled, but something underneath it made the entire ballroom stop breathing for a second. Arthur Whitmore approached slowly from the crowd, adjusting the cuffs of his dark suit. "Damien," he said carefully, "your grandfather specifically requested the music box be donated tonight." Damien turned toward him with cold eyes. "Then my grandfather can donate something else." The tension between them spread instantly through the room. Investors stopped talking. Reporters leaned closer. Even the orchestra had gone silent. Arthur lowered his voice slightly. "You are already behind schedule with the conditions of the trust. Causing a public scene will not help." Lena saw Damien's jaw tighten again. "Enough." Without another word, he closed the music box himself, cutting off the lullaby mid-note. The silence afterward felt almost painful. Then he looked toward Lena. "We are leaving." The drive back to the mansion passed in complete silence except for rain tapping softly against the car windows. Manhattan blurred outside in streaks of gold and silver while Damien stared straight ahead beside her, one hand clenched loosely against his knee. Lena could still hear the broken edge in his voice from the ballroom. Whatever that music box meant to him, it was deeper than grief. It looked like guilt. When the car finally stopped beneath the mansion entrance, Damien stepped out immediately, without waiting for the driver. Lena followed him inside, her heels echoing against the marble floor as he moved quickly toward the staircase. "Damien." He stopped halfway up the stairs, but did not turn around. "You should get some sleep. Not until you tell me why that music box upset you so much." Silence. Long and heavy. Then slowly, Damien faced her. The carefully controlled billionaire from the gala looked exhausted now. Older somehow. "Because it belonged to my son." Lena's breath caught instantly. Damien looked away toward the dark hallway upstairs. Or at least, it was supposed to. The confession settled quietly between them. Lena stepped closer without realizing it. "The nursery," she whispered softly. Damien nodded once. Her name was Isabel. His voice sounded distant now, almost fragile beneath the quiet of the mansion. "We were engaged. She was 7 months pregnant." Lena's chest tightened. "What happened?" Damien closed his eyes briefly like the answer. Itself hurt. "I was supposed to drive her to the hospital that night." Lena waited silently. "But I stayed at the office arguing over a merger." A bitter smile touched his face for barely a second. "I chose work." Again. The pain in his voice made something inside Lena ache unexpectedly. Damien rested one hand against the staircase railing, staring at nothing. "She drove alone during the storm." He swallowed hard before continuing. "The doctors saved me years ago from becoming poor. But they could not save them." Lena noticed it then. The slight tremble in his breathing. The way his carefully built walls were beginning to crack open piece by piece. Damien Wolf had spent years convincing the world he was cold because it was easier than admitting he blamed himself for everything he lost. "That is why the trust matters so much," Lena realized quietly. "Your family wants another heir." Damien laughed softly then, but there was no humor in it. "My grandfather does not care about healing. He cares about legacy." Lena looked at him for a long moment before speaking carefully. "And what do you care about?" Damien finally met her eyes again. For the first time since she met him, there was no control left in his expression. Only exhaustion. Only grief. "I honestly do not know anymore." Then, before Lena could answer, a sharp pain suddenly twisted through her chest, so suddenly she grabbed the edge of the staircase to steady herself. Damien's entire expression changed instantly. "Lena." But she forced herself upright too quickly, hiding the fear in her eyes before he could see it. Lena forced a small smile despite the sharp pressure still lingering beneath her ribs. "I am fine," she said too quickly. Damien did not move. His eyes stayed fixed on her face with unsettling focus, as if he already knew she was lying. "You turned pale." "It is just stress." She released the staircase railing slowly, hoping he had not noticed how tightly she had been gripping it. After a long moment, Damien finally stepped closer. "Do you need a doctor?" The question surprised her, not because of the words themselves, but because of how carefully he asked them. There was no coldness in his voice. Now, only concern. Real concern. Lena looked away first. No, silence settled between them again while rain tapped softly against the tall windows at the end of the hallway. Then Damien glanced toward the third floor above them. "I have not spoken about Isabel in almost 3 years." Lena looked back at him quietly. "Why tell me now?" He gave a tired breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "Maybe because you looked at that nursery like it was something sacred instead of tragic." The words landed harder than he realized. Lena felt her throat tighten unexpectedly. Damien studied her expression carefully. What is it? Nothing. Lena. The way he said her name stopped her. Softer than before. Less like a contract. More like a person trying to reach someone standing far away. She looked down at the emerald ring on her finger, turning it slightly beneath the warm chandelier light. You are not the only one who lost something, she whispered. Damien went still. Lena instantly regretted saying it. She started to step away, but Damien's voice stopped her again. What did you mean by that? Her chest tightened painfully. Not physical this time. Emotional. Old memories rising too quickly. Hospital lights. Monitors. Tiny fingers wrapped around hers for only a few moments before silence took everything away again. Lena swallowed hard. Nothing that matters now. Damien watched her carefully, and for the first time she realized how dangerous his attention could be. Most people saw a billionaire businessman, but Damien noticed details. The hesitation in her breathing. The sadness she hid too quickly. The way her eyes avoided certain subjects. Someone hurt you, he said quietly. Lena shook her head immediately. Please do not do that. Do what? Pretend you suddenly care. The words came out sharper than she intended. Damien's expression changed slightly, like the accusation hit somewhere vulnerable. You think I cannot? Lena laughed softly, but there was pain behind it. You married me because your family demanded an heir. That was before. The answer slipped out before he could stop it. Silence flooded the staircase instantly. Damien seemed almost surprised by his own words. Lena looked at him carefully now. Before what? He stared at her for several seconds without answering. Then finally, quietly. Before I started seeing you. Her heartbeat stumbled unexpectedly. Damien stepped back almost immediately after saying it, rebuilding the walls around himself in real time. Get some rest, he said again, colder now. You have a foundation luncheon tomorrow. He turned and disappeared upstairs before she could answer. Lena remained standing alone beneath the chandelier long after his footsteps faded. Then slowly, she reached into the pocket of her coat and pulled out something she had hidden there for years. A tiny hospital bracelet with faded pink lettering. She stared at it with trembling fingers while tears blurred her vision. Baby heart. 6 pounds. 4 ounces. Lena closed her eyes instantly as the memory crashed through her all over again. And upstairs, behind the locked door of the nursery, soft piano music suddenly began playing once more. The foundation luncheon the next afternoon felt colder than the gala somehow. Sunlight poured through the massive glass ceiling of the Wolf Foundation ballroom, reflecting against polished marble and rows of white floral arrangements. But tension lingered beneath every conversation. Lena sat beside Damien at the head table while board members and investors filled the room around them. Every few minutes, she noticed someone glance toward her stomach before quickly looking away again. The unspoken expectation followed her everywhere now. Heir. Legacy. Future. It made her chest feel tight. Damien seemed to notice it too. Each time another uncomfortable question surfaced, his expression darkened slightly. Mrs. Wolf, one older investor said with a practiced smile, the family must be thrilled about the possibility of continuing the Wolf bloodline. Lena's fingers tightened around her water glass before she could stop herself. Across the table, Arthur Whitmore watched her reaction carefully. Damien set his fork down with quiet precision. My wife is not a public investment strategy, he said calmly. The investor immediately looked uncomfortable. Of course. I only meant, I know. Exactly what you meant. Silence spread across the ballroom again. Lena looked toward Damien in surprise. The old Damien from a week ago would never have defended her twice in public. Yet now every time someone pushed too far, he stepped in before she even spoke. And somehow that frightened her more than the contract ever had. Because kindness from him felt dangerous. Real. After the luncheon ended, Damien remained trapped in meetings upstairs while Lena slipped quietly outside for air. The Wolf Foundation overlooked the river, and cold autumn wind swept through the stone terrace as she wrapped her coat tighter around herself. For the first time in days, the world felt quiet. Then she heard footsteps behind her. You are handling this circus better than most women in Manhattan would. Lena turned to find Arthur Whitmore standing near the terrace doors, hands folded neatly behind his back. I am not trying to impress Manhattan, she answered softly. Arthur studied her carefully for a moment before speaking again. Do you know why Damien's grandfather created the heir clause? Lena shook her head slowly. Arthur's expression turned distant. The Wolf family lost their youngest son decades ago. Since then, legacy became an obsession in that family. Damien inherited that pressure long before he inherited money. Lena looked toward the river silently. Pressure does not excuse treating people like contracts. No, Arthur admitted quietly. But grief changes people. The words landed harder than she expected. Arthur stepped closer to the railing beside her. You should know something, Mrs. Wolf. Before you arrived, Damien had not entered that nursery in nearly 2 years. Lena's breath caught slightly. But now, Arthur looked back toward the ballroom windows upstairs where Damien's silhouette moved behind the glass. Now he plays piano there almost every night. Before Lena could respond, a sudden wave of dizziness hit her so sharply she grabbed the stone railing beside her. Arthur immediately frowned. Mrs. Wolf, I am fine, she whispered, but the world tilted briefly around her. Her heartbeat felt uneven again. Wrong. Arthur studied her pale face carefully, and for a second Lena feared he somehow knew. Then the terrace doors opened behind them. Damien stepped outside immediately, his expression tightening the second he saw her leaning against the railing. What happened? Arthur answered first. I believe your wife is unwell. Damien crossed the terrace in seconds. Lena. His voice was lower now. Worried. He touched her arm gently, and Lena realized his hands were warm despite the cold wind. You are shaking. It is nothing. But Damien was no longer listening. His eyes had already locked onto the small orange prescription bottle that had slipped halfway out of her purse when she grabbed the railing. Silence fell instantly between them as Damien slowly pulled the bottle free and read the label. Cardiac medication. Damien stared at the prescription bottle in silence while cold wind swept across the terrace around them. The label reflected faintly beneath the afternoon sunlight. Cardiac arrhythmia medication. Refill after refill. His eyes slowly lifted toward Lena's face, and for the first time since she met him, she saw genuine fear there. How long? He asked quietly. Lena immediately reached for the bottle, but Damien did not let go right away. Arthur Whitmore stepped back carefully, sensing the sudden intimacy of the moment. Mr. Wolf, he said softly, I will leave you both alone. Neither of them answered. The terrace doors closed behind Arthur, leaving only the river wind and the silence between them. Damien looked at the bottle once more before finally placing it carefully into Lena's hand. You lied to me. His voice was not angry. Somehow that made it worse. Lena wrapped her coat tighter around herself. I did not owe you my medical history. Damien took a slow breath, struggling to control something behind his expression. You almost collapsed. I said I am fine. Stop saying that. The sharpness in his voice startled both of them. Damien turned away instantly, one hand pressing against the back of his neck as if trying to steady himself. Everyone keeps saying they are fine right before they disappear, he said quietly. The words hit Lena harder than she expected. She watched him standing there. Beneath the gray autumn sky, shoulders tense beneath his tailored coat, looking less like a billionaire and more like a man exhausted from losing people he loved. Slowly, Lena sat down on the stone bench near the terrace railing. When I was 19, she began softly, I thought I had my whole life planned out. Damien stayed silent, but listened. I was engaged. We were broke, but we were happy. Her fingers trembled slightly around the prescription bottle. Then I got pregnant. The river below blurred faintly through her tears. Our daughter came early. Too early. Damien slowly turned back toward her. Lena swallowed hard before continuing. She lived for 3 hours. The silence afterward felt endless. Damien's entire expression changed like something inside him had cracked open completely. Lena stared down at her hands. Afterward, the doctors found a heart condition. Stress makes it worse sometimes. She laughed softly through the pain. So apparently grieving and poverty are not excellent for cardiac health. Damien crossed the terrace slowly and sat beside her without saying a word. For once, there were no contracts between them. No expectations. Just two broken people carrying different versions of the same loss. What was her name? He asked finally. Lena closed her eyes briefly. Rose. Damien lowered his head for a moment, absorbing the answer like it physically hurt him. Then quietly, almost carefully, he reached for her hand. Lena froze slightly when his fingers intertwined with hers. Warm. Steady. Real. I am sorry, he whispered. No billionaire mask. No cold control. Just honesty. Tears slipped silently down Lena's cheeks before she could stop them. Damien gently brushed one away with his thumb, and something shifted between them forever in that moment. Not obligation, not performance, something frighteningly real. Then suddenly, the terrace doors burst open behind them. A young assistant hurried outside looking pale. "Mr. Wolf," she said breathlessly, "there is a situation upstairs." Damien stood immediately. "What happened?" The assistant hesitated nervously. "A woman just arrived asking to see you. She says," the girl swallowed hard. "She says her son is yours."